Happy Tuesday. Thank you for tuning into my page. If this is the first time you're tuning in, I welcome you. My name is Boalia Desmond. I'm a wife to one, a mom of two boys, and I'm on a mission to help families create and increase generational wealth because of what Debt Freedom has done for our family. And I think everybody should live a life of freedom. So today's message, was actually just a message that was prompted by a thought and prompted by something that I heard too. And so I just titled my message simply, Be Mindful. And, so what am I talking about? I want to talk today about being mindful of our responses, especially when it comes to relationships in regards to our parents and in regards to our children. So just being mindful of whether or not your parents or you feel as though your parents treat you a certain way when the conditions are right versus when, they don't approve. And what do I mean by that? So maybe a child misbehaves, right? Or maybe you as a child misbehaved and didn't act to the standards of your parents, and it almost felt as though they withheld some of that love. It became conditional. And that sort of thing can trickle down to the way that we treat our children. So thinking about our own lives or thinking about your own life, do you feel as though there are times when your children feel as though if they are not they're not acting up to your standards, or they're not acting up to what we expect them to, that we withhold a part of that, and they feel as though they can't get 100% of our love. And I just thought, how damaging that can be when, number one, when it's not discussed, and number two, when it's actually felt by the recipient. Do you remember a time when you felt as though you had to earn your parents' love? Our children should never feel like they should earn our love, because it should be there. And yes, they mess up, and yes, they don't always act right. But I, in my opinion, don't believe that we have the right to withhold love or withhold things just because of their actions or them acting a certain way. As far as loving them should be unconditional. But as far as setting boundaries, when we have boundaries and we have said, this is what we expectations, and then when those expectations aren't met, if it's monetary stuff, if it's things that are tangible, I can see withholding that kind of stuff, but never when it comes to emotional. Never when it comes to emotional, because I think the damage just ends up being too great, and then that kind of stuff gets passed on. So just being mindful, examine yourself before you respond to your children, examine your heart, always understanding that we come from, our children mean well, just like we mean well, right? And we don't always, there's always going to be a time when we are all going to disappoint someone. But just to think of the love of the Father, right? The way that the Father loves us. Imagine if when we made mistakes, or when we did things that, we knew He said to do something and we didn't do it. Imagine if all of a sudden we felt as though the Lord became distant from us. And if you ever feel distant from God, it's not because He moved, it's because you are acting out of either shame, or you're acting out of what you think the Father thinks of you. And His love for us doesn't change. His opinion of us doesn't change. Right? So just being mindful. So that was the only message I had today. Be mindful of how you respond. Be mindful of how you act towards your, in relationships with your parents and also your children. Thanks. See you tomorrow.